Shalom Israel. Shalom Israel. It's Brother Thamayan coming to you from the West Coast. I want to give a shout out to all the Israelites scattered abroad. I pray that all my brothers and sisters out there are standing strong in the faith and that they continue on their walk. Anyone dealing with any sort of financial or physical ailments, I pray that the Most High be with you as well. So let's get into it. We're going to pick up from where we left off last time, dealing with the history of the Maccabees, the Hasmonean Dynasty. Last time we talked about the beginning of the Hasmonean Dynasty leading up into the history of the Maccabees, where we spoke about the rise of the Greek Empire and taking over of Alexander and his kingdom, as well as the beginning of the Hellenistic period. So let's pick up from where we left off from with the last slide, the last PowerPoint, and then we'll transition into the new one. So let me get that situated. Okay. All right, so we left off talking about Alexander's reign. So let's pick up there. So Alexander's reign was from 334 BCE. He invaded the Persian and Mede Empire and began a series of campaigns that lasted a decade. Following his conquest of Asia Minor, Alexander broke the power of the Persians and Medes in the series of decisive battles, including those of Issus and Gaugamela. He subsequently overthrew Darius III and conquered the Persian and Mede Empire in its entirety. So during 334 is during when Alexander's reign was at its height. So here is a map of Alexander's reformed empire, showing the areas that he took over during that time, which is the majority of the known world during that time. As we mentioned before, Alexander's reign and after his death ushered in the beginning of the Hellenistic period. And so let's read here. The beginning of the Hellenistic period. Due to the demand of his homesick troops, he eventually turned back the Bias River and later died in 323 BCE. In Babylon, the city of Mesopotamia that he had planned to establish his empire capital. In the years following Alexander's death, a series of civil wars broke out across the Macedonian Empire, eventually leading to its disintegration at the hands of the Diadochi, marking the start of the Hellenistic period. So it's basically saying that after Alexander died, it created a series of war amongst his own people, where people were actually fighting and going to battle against each other to see who was going to be the ones to take over or assume the role of Alexander or the possessions of Alexander. Leading us into the rise of the four generals, which are the four generals that Alexander appointed to be his successors after his death. He appointed each general a region for them to take over and to manage and to conquer and to have dominion over. And amongst those four generals is where a lot of those wars and battles amongst each other broke out. We're going to get quite a few quotes about it in the book of the dividing of the spoils. And so let's read this scripture here in the Apocrypha, the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9. After his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So after the four generals that Alexander appointed to be his successors, even their children, after the children that they had, became put crowns upon themselves also. And it says that wickedness was multiplied throughout the earth. And so that was the beginning of the Hellenistic period. So let's get into this next PowerPoint. History of the Maccabees. So as we just read, we'll read it one more time. Book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So that was the beginning of the Hellenistic period. So we've seen the book that we had right there, the dividing of the spoils, and here's a few excerpts that we have from the book that we'll read over to give us a little bit more detail. The first one, the first war of the successors. War was about to break out among the successors. No one can have been surprised. There had never been much of a chance that that this particular succession crisis would pass without bloodshed. But perhaps no one could have foreseen quite how much blood would have been shed before the dismemberment of Alexander's empire was complete. The 2 decades from 321 to 301 saw 4 brutal wars, or rather, a more or less unbroken period of warfare, with each phase triggered in by the concluding event of the previous one. It was a civil war, Macedonian against Macedonian, but on such a scale that it truly deserves to be called a world war. First, the action took place all over the known world, shifting between the Greek mainland and the islands, North Africa, Asia Minor, the Middle East, and Iran. Only the Western Mediterranean was spared of the successors' attentions, but it was nonetheless disturbed. Second, the objective of a number of participants was world domination. Thousands upon thousands of lives were lost on battlefields. Our sources leave us merely to imagine the suffering and loss of life among civilians. One of the most savage periods of human history was ushered in by the ruthless ambitions of the successors. So these successors that came in after Alexander, according to their books, created one of the most gruesome times in their history. One of their more serious civil wars amongst themselves, where a lot of bloodshed took place, a lot of death took place. Let's read the next slide, the next excerpt. Mobility and the spread of Hellenism. Despite the long hospitality between Greeks and Persians, Greeks had also played peaceful parts of the Armenian Empire as mercenaries, traders, artisans, physicians, secretaries, engineers, envoys, entertainers, explorers, and translators. They had passed through or been resident in the domains of satraps and even occasionally in the court of the great king himself. But the numbers involved in these earlier interactions were nothing compared to the influx of Greek and Macedonian settlers in the wake of Alexander's conquest. As the Eastern Greek rebellions show us, there were already at least 20,000 Greek immigrants just far-flung Bactria before the permanent or large-scale settlements had been built there. The main wave of immigration lasted no more than the 3 generations of after Alexander's conquest. There was 2 phases. In the first, land needed to be secured in the short term, so the first settlers were usually men who had been hired as mercenaries were detailed to garrison as existing town or a fortress. In the second, these mercenaries were given a grant of land, the price of which was that they or their sons remained available for military duty. So basically what it's saying is that what they were trying to do was put themselves in different places and locations little by little to try to take over and have world domination. They would send themselves as mercenaries or traders into certain locations where they could be at odds or trying to create some sort of relationship or friendship amongst another nation, and would send their people there to buy some sort of land or have some sort of hold or some sort of position in that place, in that location, where they can little by little start to spread out and take over land and to start do certain things. So that was part of their plan, was to put people in places initially before they got there to start to take over. And so what the successors were fighting over and what the successors wanted was all the establishments of Alexander, which one of the things that was notable, or one of the things that they take note of during the time of the Greek Empire, was the building of gymnasiums and theaters. They had a particular design that they utilized to create theaters and put on shows, and they also had particular and um, rules and things that they set into place in order to partake in such things, as far as the theaters or as far as the gymnasium. And so the way that they partook in those things were usually unlawful for the Jews, for the people that followed the laws and statutes and commandments of the Most High God. And so their customs were a bit more heathenistic as opposed to ours, and we typically wouldn't partake in those things. And so, as we spoke about the rise of the four generals, there are two in particular that play a major role in the creation and the beginning of the Hasmonean dynasty. Um, so let's get into it. From another excerpt from, what is it, the dividing of the spoils. We got on the left side here, it says the kingdoms of Ptolemy and Seleucus, which are the two generals that I was mentioning that gave us, that kind of helped create and start the Hasmonean dynasty. Right? It was because of what these generals, because of what these people did, that pushed us to a certain brink that caused us to come together. Let's get into it. The kingdoms of Ptolemy and Seleucus. One of the most important effects of the Battle of Issus was that it left Seleucus and Ptolemy in firm control of their kingdoms. This is a good point, then, at which to pause from the war narrative and take a closer look at those kingdoms. Insofar as we have evidence, many conclusions must remain tentative. But we are even worse off for other successor kingdoms. Seleucid Asia and Ptolemaic Egypt remain the best chances for investigating the important topic of the successors made of what the successors made of their realms once they had carved up Alexander's empire. So these two generals are the best example, or the closest to getting back to what Alexander was trying to accomplish. These two are the best example of continuing on Alexander's legacy. After Issus, the Ptolemaic kingdom remained unchanged in terms of core territory until the Roman takeover in 30 BCE. The Seleucid kingdom suffered more from shifting borders, and there were mountain tribes in several parts of the empire that were altogether untamed. We have already seen that in 304, Seleucid ceded the satrapies bordering India and Chhatragrupa, and he and his descendants had to put up with several independent or semi-independent kingdoms in Asia Minor, such as Bithynia for much of the 3rd century. Persis was a semi-independent, and around the middle of the 3rd century, the Seleucid lost Bactria, which went independent under Greek leadership. Worse was to follow. The Parthian satrap declared his province free from Seleucid rule in 246, but within 10 years had lost it to invaders from the north, who held it for 35 years. Seleucus' great-great-grandson Antiochus III recovered it, but only temporarily. And so it's talking about how Seleucus lost his empire for a period of time, and his great-grandson Antiochus III recovered it and started to implement those rules and that Greek that Greek rule in Hellenism once again. And so this is where we come into play, where Antiochus of the Seleucid Empire and Ptolemy and all these other generals start to try to force us to partake in their Hellenistic ways, in their heathenistic ways. Let's get back to the Apocrypha. We just read First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9. Let's read verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year in the kingdom of the Greeks. And so, as we just read in the excerpt, how it talked about Seleucid was a hostage during the time of the Romans when they took over, and his grandson, is the one that recovered it and took it back over. But as we just read, only temporarily, right? And so Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, is a guy who thinks very highly of himself. Epiphanies meaning God manifest, right? He thinks that he considers himself or looks at himself as if he's a god. And so this is who came. Verse 11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. And so there were some wicked individuals, some wicked Jews that were trying to gather the thoughts of the many and convince them to make a pact or to make a deal or to make a covenant with the Greeks. So to try to convince them to concede to the Hellenistic ways, to concede to Hellenism, and to start to incorporate the heathen's culture and the heathen's customs as a part of our own. Let's drop down and read verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. And so there were some people that said, you know what, you're right. Let's go ahead and make this covenant with the Greeks. Let's just throw in the towel. Just start doing what they do. Let's incorporate their customs into our customs. We're gonna celebrate all the holidays they celebrate. Let's do it. Let's go in. Right. And so it says that one of the things that they wanted to do was to incorporate a place of exercise, which is known as the gymnasium, which we kind of looked at some of the images and spoke about earlier. But in order to go into the gymnasium or to utilize the gymnasium, there were stipulations. There was rules that you had to abide by in order to utilize the gymnasium. And we'll actually get into it here. Let's read the excerpt. It says, Antiochus used Jason's power as a high priest over the Jewish people to build a gymnasium just outside the temple. With that, strengthening the Greek culture in the heartland of the Jewish community. So by him creating a gymnasium right outside the temple is giving power into the Greek culture amongst the Jews. So it's telling the Jews, okay, you know, this is what we're about to start doing. This is what we're about now. It was a symbol of Greek Hellenism, and having it outside the temple showed the Jewish community exactly who was in charge. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a symbol of Greek Hellenism. So by us just putting that right in front of the temple is already disrespect to our Lord, right? Disrespectful to the Most High God. And that's a part of the reason why they wanted it to be placed right there, to show and establish dominance and say, okay, you know what? This is no longer going to be a land of such and such. This is now going to be Greek territory. This is going to be Hellenism going on in these places. The Hellenistic idea of masculinity was shown in the rule that one must be naked to enter the gymnasium. So the only way that you can even go into the gymnasium states that you must be naked to get inside of it. So right in front of the temple, you got these exercise activities going on with people in there just butt naked, walking into the gym just butt naked right in front of the temple. It's just disrespectful. Being naked in public was strictly forbidden under Jewish laws. So any Jewish person that went into the gymnasium violated the laws of the covenant. So right there it shows and states that anyone that even partook and went into the gymnasium was in direct disobedience of the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High God. The state understood this and therefore made it a legal requirement for anybody who can afford it to go at least once. And so with the Greeks knowing that this is directly disobedience to the covenant of the Lord, right? It says that with them knowing that, they made it a legal requirement for anybody who can afford it to go again, to go at least once. And so with them knowing that that's not a part of our customs, that's directly the opposite of what we are trying to uphold and promote. They made it a rule in the law that okay, you got to go at least once a year, trying to force us into transgression. And we already had a lot of wicked individuals that were trying to partake in their customs to begin with. And so things are starting to trend in a bad direction. Let's stay in the Apocrypha with the first Maccabees chapter 1, but let's drop down to verse 25. And it reads, Therefore there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were. So there was a mourning in Israel, everywhere where the Greeks were, everywhere where those wicked Israelites that wanted to partake in the custom of the Greeks was causing mourning in Israel, right? Because to see our people partake in things that we know is so beneath us, it's just not a part of our nature, not a part of our laws. It was a saddening thing to see amongst our people. Verse 29. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude. So it says 2 years went up after all the stuff was going on, and after those 2 years, the king, he has, people go and collect his taxes, or whoever paid tribute to the king, he goes and collects and handles all the tribute that's being paid on to him. And so he sent his collector of tribute onto the city of Judah, who came into to Jerusalem with a big multitude. He had a big army with him. He had some folks with him, right? Verse 30. And spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people in Israel. So it said when the chief collector of tribute came down, he was talking to the Israelites and it was being peaceable, telling them, hey, we appreciate you guys partaking in our customs. We appreciate you building the gymnasium, going every, once a year, whoever that can afford it and knows that come continuously. We appreciate all of that. Talking all these sweet nothings to the Israelites, and shortly after that, just flipped the switch on them and started destroying everybody, killing everybody, smoting people, just oppressing the people. Right? Let's get back over to the excerpt. It says the already strained relations between the pious Jewish people that did not accept Hellenism and the Seleucid Empire were shattered when Antiochus Epiphanes adopted his father's policy of universal Hellenization, but took it to new heights as Epiphanes looked at Alexander the Great of Macedon and aspired to have his name in the history books alongside him. He needed to distinguish himself above his predecessors. So just as we read earlier, where it talks about the two kingdoms that took Alexander's ideals and Alexander's empire the furthest were the Ptolemy and Seleucus. And so with that being said, Seleucus or Antiochus is looking back and saying, okay, you know what? I look up to Alexander. I aspire to be greater than Alexander. So he's trying to he's considering to himself, what can he do, right? To be like Alexander, or to consider himself greater than Alexander. How can he get his name in his history books amongst his people, right? The best way to do that, he thought, was to enforce the Greek culture on all the Jewish population, a feat that had been so far elusive. So his idea of how he can accomplish that, how he can become greater than Alexander, how he can be one of the greatest amongst his rankings in their history books, is by forcing Hellenism on the Jewish people, which is something that they stated had not been done prior to that. It hadn't been done before. And so that goes to show how strong-willed and how strong-minded our people are, that we never fully given into any of these customs of these other nations. We've always standing on our own too and done our own thing. We've always stuck with the Lord, right? And though we might have our ups and downs, we never really given into Hellenism until that point. And so now we're starting to break. We're starting to give into it. And we're seeing that as a people. And that's why we read earlier there was much mourning in Israel in every place where they were, because we've seen that our people were going contrary to how we used to. He accepted a bribe and approved the takeover of Jason of the Oniad family to the now de facto client position of high priesthood. And so some of the people, some of the brothers that he made pacts with, right? The king made pacts with certain individuals. He put them in high places, right? This is equivalent to how they say now selling your soul or selling out, right? We got sellouts that go and promote foolishness amongst our nation, and now they get put into certain offices. Now they get, certain privileges because they sold out, right? They sold their people out, sold themselves out. And so, once we have sellouts amongst ourselves, and we have uh, a lot of Israel turning to heathenistic ways and turning to the Hellenism and partaking in all their cultures, right? It's going to create a rebellion amongst the people. It's going to create that resentment amongst the people, as we just read earlier, for all of those that upheld the law, the pious Jewish people, the ones that were fervent in the law. This created a sort of friction amongst their people, amongst themselves, right? Let's get back into the excerpt. Rebellion. Although many of the Jewish community were at this point Hellenized, the persecution of the Jewish people and the destruction of practicing Judaism united the Jewish people in Judea. So even though it says most of Israel at this point was keeping up with the Joneses, keep partaking in the foolishness, you're doing all the customs of the heathen, right? Even though the majority of the community was doing that at this time, right? That's what it's talking about. Let's read on. Jewish people and the Jewish people needed someone to lead them. When Antiochus sent some of his officers to the town of Modin to lay down his tyranny and enact the oppressive laws that he had enforced, was met by a local Jewish country priest named Mattathias. So they continuously kept coming down to oppress us and to abuse us and to smote us or to smite us and to do all that. Even that time that we just read wasn't the only time. It was a continuous act that they were doing, over and over and over. And it says that we needed a leader. We needed someone to step up in that time. We're being oppressed, and our people wasn't standing for it. Even though the majority of people were Hellenized, we still had the small righteous few. This turned out to be a very portentous meeting. The country priest was ordered to fulfill his duty to the state and to be the first to sacrifice an animal to an altar of an idol. And so when they got there, they said, okay, Antiochus was sent down there. He sent some of his officers to go down there and say, okay, it's that time again. Go and whip them up, beat them up, do what you got to do, but you make sure that once you get down there, they pay tribute, right? They make that sacrifice on the altar to the idols that we worship. So you make sure that they do that. And so they went down there to go and to be oppressive and to beat and to pill and to do all this stuff and to force them to sacrifice to an animal of an altar. But it says he refused, and when another Jewish man stepped forward to do it, he murdered the officer, tearing down the idol. Mattathias preached, let everyone who was zealous for the law and who stands by the covenant follow me. And so when they told him to sacrifice the animal, he refused to do it. And he said another brother came out and said, you know what, I'll do it. He won't do it, I'll do it. And after he did that, it says that Mattathias went up there and he took him out. He slaughtered him. Right? We can get that in the scriptures. Let's flip over to the scriptures. Stay in First Maccabees, but let's flip over to chapter 2 and let's read verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jerib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And so, as we just read earlier, Antiochus sent some of his officers to the town of Modin to lay down his tyranny. That's where he came across Mattathias, right? Brother that lived right there in Modin. Verse 2. And he had 5 sons: Jonan, called Caddis; Simon, called Thassi; Judas, who was called Maccabees; Eleazar, called Avaron; and Jonathan, whose surname was Apis. So Mattathias, the brother who slew the other brother that was trying to sacrifice the animal to the idol, right? Said he had 5 sons. He had 5 sons. He had Jonan, he had Simon, he had Judas, Eleazar, and Jonathan. Verse 18. Now therefore come thou first, and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. So this is like what we just read in the excerpt, right? Okay. So we talks about how he came down and met Mattathias down in Modin and told him, okay, come and make the offering. This is what he's telling him. He said, if you make the offering, right, you'll become a friend unto the king, get all this honor and silver and gold and many rewards, even though they keep coming down and oppressing us and murdering us every time they come down anyways. But these are the lies that they're trying to tell us to convince us to break our laws and our statutes and our commandments. Verse 19. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, I give consent to his commandments. So he's saying right there, okay, I know you got everybody on payroll. I know you got everybody making these offerings to these idols, so on and so forth, right? He said, and they give consent to his commandments and say, okay, yeah, it's fine, I'll do it, they'll do it, right? Everybody forsaking their religion, falling away from what it is that they uphold, their customs. Verse 22, we will not hearken to the king's words, to go from our religion either on the right hand or the left. So he told them, there's no way that, I know you got all these people, but there's no way I'm doing this. There's no way you're going to get me to forsake my Lord. There's no way you're going to get me to forsake my laws, my statutes, my commandments. I'm not doing it. Right? Verse 24. Which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to the judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Also the king's commissioner who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time. And the altar, he pulled it down. So in the excerpt, it gave us a little brief, it touched on it a little bit, but now we get the details of it, the meat of it, right? It says that Mattathias seen what was going on. He got so upset and so angry, he was shaking. He couldn't hold his anger in. He got so upset that he just hopped up there and slew the brother that wanted to make the sacrifice to the idol. Then he slew the king's commissioner who was compelling people to make these offerings unto these idols and to commit all this wickedness, right? Then he pulled down the altar and tore it down and tore all of it up. He said, get this out of here. There's no way we're going to continue to partake in this, right? We needed someone to stand, just like we read in the last excerpt. And that was Mattathias taking a stand for Israel, saying there's no way that we're going to continue in these wicked ways and partaking in these heathenistic customs. We done with that. Stay in 1 Maccabees chapter 2, but flip over to verse 49. Now then the time drew near that Mattathias should die. He said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. And so I know whenever you guys get a chance, read the whole chapter, read both books, First Maccabees and the Second Maccabees, all of it. But with what we're going over, at least for sure, make sure you read the first few chapters of the First Maccabees, because I didn't get every single detail in here because, we're kind of constrained for time. However, we can get the gist of what's going on. So as we read earlier, Mattathias had 5 sons, right? We read off all of his children. And at this point that we're reading now, after Mattathias had slew the brother that was trying to make the offering on the idol, for the idol, at the altar to the idol, and slew the king's commissioners and everybody else that was there, tore all that stuff down. This is a little bit of time that's passed after that, and now Mattathias is coming to the point where he's about to beat his end, right? He's going to pass away. And so now he's talking to his children, to his sons, and he's going to put them into office and put them in position to succeed, to be to succeed after he's no longer existing anymore, right? So let's read verse 65. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always. He shall be a father unto you. So he said Simon has always been a wise brother, so I want him to be the councilman, right? Let him be the overseer. Let him be the the head over everything, right? Let him be as a father unto you. Any questions, problems, concerns, you go to Simon, right? He shows wisdom. As for Judas Maccabees, he hath been mighty and strong, even from a youth up. Let him be your captain and fight the battle of the people. And so he says, okay, and for you, Judas, ever since you was a little boy, you always been strong. You have always had a strength about you. So I want you to be the general, right? I want you to lead the battlefield. I want you to be the one to fight the battle for the people, right? Right now the people is lost, but we're going to bring righteousness back. Flip over to chapter 3, and let's read verse 1. Then his son Judas, called Maccabees, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that helped with his father. And they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. So he gat his people great honor, and put on a breastplate as a giant, and girt his warlike harness about him. And he made battles, protecting the host with the sword. And so after the death of Mattathias, it talks about how Judas started to rise up in his stead. He started to partake in these battles, right? He's riding on saddle, right? He's got a sword. He's out here taking out all of these heathens that are coming against the Most High's laws and the Most High statutes, and against the Most High's people. And so he's trying to make sure that we do what we got to do. He's riding for Israel. Flip over to verse 16. And when he came near to the going up of Beth-horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who, when they saw a host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude, and so strong, seeing we are ready to faint with fasting all this day? And so they're getting ready to go to war, right? There's a battle that's ensuing. And as they're getting ready, Judas was looking for, he went forth to go meet him with a small company. He just had a few cats with him, right? He said, I got my dogs with me. Let's go ride out, right? And when they went to go meet the heathen to get ready for battle, some of the brothers that was riding with Judas started to question. They said, man, you sure got a lot of folks over there, man. I don't know how we're going to be able to do this today. And we've been fasting all day. We've been over here trying to make sure that we keep the feast. And some of us is a little tired, man. We ain't ate nothing. And they outnumber us. So what we going to do? Unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few, and with God of heaven it is all one, to deliver with the great multitude or a small company. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and children, and to spoil us. So it says, Judas told him, he said, it ain't nothing for the Most High to even with a small company, a few cats, to make sure that we still take care of what we got to do, right? So for them, they coming with pride, right? They coming with envy. They coming with hatred. They come with all these. They come to take our wives and to take our children and to spoil us and to make us not be righteous anymore, right? They come for all these wicked reasons. Verse 21. But we fight for our lives and our laws. So we fight for something greater than just for fleshly things, right? We're fighting for righteousness. We're fighting for our Lord, right? Wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. So he's telling us, just because of us fighting for righteousness and them fighting for so many wicked reasons, the Most High is gonna throw them from right in front of us. The Most High is gonna make sure that we leave here victorious, regardless of the number that they have, regardless of us fasting and feeling a bit tired, and any of that. The Lord will overcome. He will prevail. Stand first Maccabees, flip over to chapter 4, and verse 28. The next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen that he might subdue them. And when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, "Blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan the son of Saul and his armor bearer." All right, so it said we're about to go back to war again. We see another multitude of people, right? Every time we go to battle, they think that these numbers, overwhelming numbers, is what's going to be their ticket to success, right? And so Judah sent up the prayer. He said, "Okay, Lord, ride with us. Give us the strength that you gave David. Give us the strength that you gave Jonathan. Shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen." So let them be confused as to why they can't beat up these Israelites, even though they got more power, they got more numbers, they got more horses, they got more weaponry, they got more everything that you think you need to win a battle, right? But they don't got the right heart. They don't got the right spirit. So they joined battle, and there were slain the host of Lysias, about 5,000 men, even before them were they slain. And so they took out all 5,000 of them, took them out. All right, verse 35. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of the Judah soldiers, and how they were ready to either live or die valiantly, he went to Antiochia, right, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again unto Judea. So after he seen his soldiers getting taken out, being put to flight, right, getting waxed, he ran back into town and said, "Okay, let me get some more. Let me get some more people. Let me recruit some more. Who else can come? Anybody else can come? If we get some more people down here, I guarantee we can win. We just need a few more bodies. Come on down." Right? And he wanted to go back into the battle, but come with more numbers. But as we know, as we read earlier, it's nothing for the Lord to shut up many in the hands of few, right? Let's get back to the excerpt. Aftermath. The Maccabees had accomplished their pursuit of religious liberty and were going after political independence. Although the Jewish people supported their fight against the shackles of religious desecration, they were unsure of the political and cultural influence of the Maccabees. The Hellenistic way of life was already entrenched unto the Jewish people. However, after the Maccabees conquered the whole of Judea and enforced the collapse of the Seleucid kingdom in Palestine, the Jewish people imposed themselves as an autonomous group. Judea was now free from the Seleucid rule, and the death of Antiochus the seventh in 129 BCE confirmed this. The Jewish people were now content with the new political purpose of the Maccabees, although no brother of Judah survived, with Simon being the last leader of the Maccabees, who died in 134 BCE. Their intentions still flourished. And so, after continuous battles, after all of these wars that we went through amongst the heathen, we were finally able to free ourselves from this Hellenistic rule and from the Greek Empire, and to become an independent state. We became autonomous to any of these other surrounding region. We upheld our own thing. We were able to get back to keeping our laws, our statutes, and our commandments, and not the ways of the heathen. Thus, creating our own dynasty, which was the Hasmonean dynasty. The Maccabees were the first to establish that dynasty with starting those wars with the Greek to create our own independent state. So let's get back to the excerpt. Hasmonean dynasty, also spelled as Hasmonean dynasty of the ancient Judea, descendants of the Maccabee family. The name derived, according to Flavius Josephus, in the Antiquity of the Jews, from the name of their ancestor Hasmoneus, Hasmon, or Hasmone. In 143 or 142 BCE, Simon Maccabeus, son of Mattathias and brother of Judas Maccabeus, succeeded his brother Jonathan as the leader of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid dynasty. He soon became independent of the Seleucids as high priest, ruler of the ethnarch of Judea. The offices were hereditary, and Simon thus became the first of the Hasmonean dynasty. So, all of that history, everything that we went through, all of those events that happened created what we have, or what was called the Hasmonean dynasty shortly after that. And so it's thanks to the Maccabees that we were able to create the Hasmonean dynasty. And so that's the last slide right there. We got a few more lessons to get in to finish the history of the Maccabees, the Hasmonean dynasty, because it goes into a little bit of the Roman Empire. But this was the beginning and the start of the Hasmonean dynasty and how it came to be. So I pray that this was a little bit informative for you guys, and you're able to digest and get some information from it. Say shalom once again to my Israelites scattered abroad, and I pray that everybody is doing well. Shalom.